Today's video is the most serious I might have made in my entire career on this platform.
I'm being blackmailed, ladies and gentlemen. Anything that's interesting, I can sort of come over here and look around. I'm not really super active, but, I do come there from time to time.
Is that in the grand majority, for clicks and revenue, basic investigative and evidentiary rules aren't met, and law enforcement, in many cases, is not even involved until well after the fact.
It was a quiet night in July when we released a list of names attached to the creator Shadman. Now, if you told me then that the inclusion of Nux Taku on that list would ripple into Mutahar creating one of the worst apologies in YouTube history, I wouldn't have believed you, but here we are. So what I have for you today is a tale of lies, deceit, betrayal, and most importantly, the tangled webs a man will weave when he is in love with a VTuber. Now, as we begin, there is one thing that I do need to commend Mutahar for. His now redacted apology, post-Nux clarity, provides us ample ability to dissect the claims he is making and show exactly where he has lied and deceived both his audience and the content creators who have treated him as an honest and trustworthy actor for years now. So without further delay, let's begin by identifying what may have caused Mutahar so much distress that he felt the need to make something he'll continuously and repeatedly ad nauseum refer to as an accountability video.
Resurfaced video of Oompaville, Some Ordinary Gamers, and Nux Taku watching Loli together on a Discord call.
Tango 90 just searched Loli! Go in! Go, go, go!
Yeah. It's gonna be one of those apology videos.
And I want to definitely have a talk about it and really explain to you exactly what this is, what it's about, give you my side of the perspective, and again, take accountability where accountability needs to be fucking taken.
Now this is obviously a noble and upstanding thing to do. Simply from seeing a Reddit post, Mutahar was ready to sit down, make a video, talk to his community. Except, is that really the full story? Was there any external influences, for example, that might have, I don't know, forced his hand a little bit?
Apparently, some of them even, maybe not neo-Nazis, but some YouTubers even sit around and do reviews of child porn. Drawn child porn. Mutahar should know that. Seemingly, he participated in a review of Lolicon himself.
Now, this would obviously be pretty bad if true, and Mutahar is very aware of that fact. You may say this is a bold claim, but I think his actions speak quite clearly to that. Because what Mutahar does next is shows the thumbnail of a video from a creator known as Nicandros. Now, Nicandros' videos are excellent resources, both on this drama and the wider drama surrounding Nux Taku. But what we need to focus on here is, far from taking accountability, Mutahar selectively chooses what to respond to from Nicandros' research. In particular, Muta chooses to respond only to one of the animes he viewed, not the one that actually contained Lolicon.
But the kind of stuff that he showed us was anime ni summer.
And watching back the actual video itself, it's quite clear that Muta is aware of what he is seeing.
Bro, they're fucking exceptionally young, Jesus Christ.
Even when Mutahar would go on to show some of the blurred images within Nicandros' video, the framing here doesn't mention that it's not the same anime that he read the description of earlier on in his apology. And to be clear, while he says he is taking accountability, it is worth noting that his biggest defense is, well, lots of big creators do this sort of thing. We all thought it was fine. Which is interesting, and we will come back to this. These are basically going to be the same defenses he will use later for his associations and blind spots revolving around Mama Max. Now, does this make Mutahar a lolicon? No. He's viewing something that he's handed by somebody else. He's not really thought too hard about it. But we're about to hit maybe one of the additional problems with this particular Mutahar drama. Mutahar keeps overcorrecting, and we'll get to that slightly later, especially involving Nux. But in this case, and possibly most problematically for Mutahar, is he makes the statement that he doesn't want to debate what Lolicon is.
Right, so right there, I'm not going to play the whole semantics, oh, is this really loli game? Like, I don't even care if somebody is like 18 or on the cusp of like turning 19. At the end of the day, high school can very much involve a minor.
His view is that if you're looking at high school age girls, that comes under the category. It would be very inconvenient then if another recently resurfaced clip has Mutahar talking about an anime called Dropouts.
So basically the premise is, it's like, if you're not smart, like if you're not a smart chick,
they turn you into like like a public urinal where like you just get fucked on a daily, like you're just getting smashed.
Which is exactly that. The issues here have been deeply compounded by his friendship with Nux. Now, the origin point of this, as I alluded to earlier, was this renewed interest in people's relationships with Shadman off the back of the Ava Chris Tyson drama. Now, Nux Taku would gain a bit of attention from our list, which sort of started a cascading effect where people started digging clips up on him. And to be clear, his relationship, or at least knowledge of Shadman, goes back a fair way. For example, we can see back in 2018, Nux talking about watching Shadman on a podcast.
I couldn't follow the fights.
I know about
It was like making me dizzy to follow the fights.
this one Shadman thing.
What? Shadman posted some more hentai? What?
That's all I know about Ruby.
Oh, okay. Really? You never saw Rubes? Interesting.
Oh, I've never seen Ruby.
Now this, as it turns out, is very much the tip of the iceberg. Nux's associations with Shadman at this point have been explored quite thoroughly. But the TLDR is this. Nux Taku had multiple DMs and messages with Shadman, he reached out to Shadman to collaborate, and while he'd defend this collaboration as a troll, that he'd bring him on to grill him, there seems to be little evidence for this other than Nux just saying that's the case. And what we can say for sure is that Nux Taku was more than happy to use Shadman's art in his thumbnails, either to draw attention because they're shocking images to a general audience, or with the knowledge that this may be appealing to a particular demographic within the anime community. Most problematic of all is, as Mutahar points out,
when I was working with Nux, a lot of the things we did talk about was being anti-Loli in that situation, and Nux very much made it clear to me that he was anti this stuff as well too, and he still maintains it to this day.
Leaving aside what this content is for a moment, let's just look at the statements as they stand. Mutahar and Nux Taku can say, we're deeply anti-Lolicon, but both of them have engaged in watching Lolicon for shock value content. Mutahar does apologise for anything he may have done to normalise this kind of content, but it's a bit too little too late. If you truly believe in a position, rather than just virtue signalling to an audience that these are the principles you hold, you probably wouldn't need this pointed out to you by a channel with less than 1,000 subscribers. Furthermore, this is not the first time this year alone that Mutahar has had to confront the fact that one of his friends has some issues around him. When we're looking at Mutahar's response to Mama Max, there are some shocking similarities in the statements Muta would give. He didn't look into Mama Max in the same way he didn't look into Nux Taku. His answers are very similar to the ones he gave when he was asked why he didn't catch these things Max was doing. He didn't have time to look into the content, he didn't have time to watch everything everyone did. But there's an underlying problem with that take. It's not one that Mutahar or anyone else would accept from any other content creator. In Mutahar's recent coverage of the Mr. Beast drama, he points out,
Why didn't your mom ever think, hey, maybe I should do a background search? Or, at least in some capacity, even if you don't background search somebody right there and then because you trust what Best Buy says, when you start to become more established and you're bringing other people into your organization, why not then background check the people that you hired in Legacy, all right? You can do that later on. You can do that on your own.
but twice this year, Mutahar has failed to do background checks on the people he makes content with. And while he is in this video disavowing Nux, it is blatantly obvious that he's not actually done an ounce of research on the guy, which is made even worse by the fact that this all kicked off in August. We're in December. Mutahar, you've had months to do this. Consistency and good research for your takes as a commentator is essential, and unfortunately, Mutahar is startlingly inconsistent when it comes to Nux. Nux has clearly engaged in behaviours that Mutahar himself finds unacceptable, and he was shown to be engaging in these behaviours months ago. This isn't just an issue for audiences, it's an issue for other content creators. Now, I'm not going to pretend to you like cutting off a friend or somebody you've worked closely with is an easy decision to make. People seem to form the impression that commentary is quite mercenary, but that's just not the reality. Many content creators will form friendships and collaborations that are not just mutually beneficial, there is a vested emotional interest in seeing your friends do well. However, the nature of the content produced within this space means credibility is incredibly important. And if you hit a point where your bias is such that you cannot be trusted on the takes you are giving, that is a death knell for a commentator. It appears, at least to me, that Mutahar put himself in a position where he simply wanted to be liked by everyone he was interacting with. Which brings us nicely to the core conflict that highlights the amount of times that Muta has just simply lied during this drama.
Now, for people who don't know, Oompaville and Nuxtaku were former members of the Some Ordinary podcast, which obviously ended 3 to 4 months ago. Now, I get to talk about that a little bit after I discuss all of this, because there's some lore about it that I can finally really discuss.
Okay, this statement is just bollocks. It implies that there's some sort of new information about the podcast ending, but we can prove that this isn't the case. On July 28th, 2024, Chud Logic and Mutahar would sit down and have a conversation on the topic of Some Ordinary podcast.
Are you going to keep off the podcast?
No, we would cancel the podcast. It's not happening. The podcast is done.
This is hard because obviously, you know, people won't be
Podcast is done, yeah. Podcast is done now.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the podcast is over. We are not filming the last episode. It's over.
Is that are you serious?
Yeah, we're not doing the podcast anymore. It's done.
Why?
We're supposed to film on Tuesday. Well, there's a couple reasons for it. A lot of that was obviously some of the Shad stuff too, because we were kind of sitting there, we're like, me and Caleb, we were just like, this is, I don't know, it's weird. The other thing was we just want to redo things maybe like 2 months down the road or something between each other, and that's kind of where we're at.
Damn. Like Stark getting iced out.
As we can see, there are 3 key points here. Firstly, that the podcast was ending due to a multitude of factors, but one major factor was Nuxtaku's association with Shadman. 2, there is a restructuring planned and that had been extended into the next couple of months. The next point is about a future event. The last podcast episode was not being filmed. As we can see, the podcast ending is being used in 2 senses. The sense that the entire podcast was ending, and that the last episode wasn't being filmed.
Yeah, nothing to do with me. And Muta even says, for context, your podcast is ending for a lot of behind-the-scenes restructuring at the moment. Nothing to do with me. It's purely business and behind-the-scenes shit. I will provide more details about this matter as it unfolds, because you obviously do not have the full story in this clip. And then he says, and nothing to do with our relationship to Nux. Which is, again, yeah, he clarified. It has nothing to do with anything. Of course, it didn't stop this video from still coming out. Nuxtaku kicked from the Some Ordinary podcast, not because of Shadman, with the greatest selective hearing of all time, but it literally does have nothing to do with Shadman.
Hey everybody, Muta here, and I just wanted to make it as clear as possible. This podcast is not over because of Nux and his situation currently. I'm flying down to Texas more often, hopefully down the road, to be filming IRL and doing the podcast with Caleb, more so like you would see with typical like IRL style podcasts where you can actually do the hosts on camera standing next to each other, and one where we don't necessarily even need to have a guest like every week, try to figure out how to get Nux on the entire show, being the fact that he lives in an NFT land and an NFT world, so to get him onto the actual podcast is another challenge itself.
Now here, we see a complete 180 and walk back. Shadman went from a major factor to no factor at all, which negates point 1, that Nux is going to be present on the new podcast, negating point 2, the podcast's last episode was filmed, negating point 3, and the whole thing was misinfo on Chud's part.
Mutahar's wife Dojangles also tunes into the stream, sending several chats that reveal that the last episode was cancelled because of Nux's Shadman situation, but they worked things out and they're still friends.
Now this is a new claim, but it makes sense for both the podcast's last episode being up and the fact that Muta at the time said he was icing Nux. After Muta and Oompaville decided to ice Nux and he revealed this on the podcast, all 3 had a talk and Muta/Oompi changed their minds. However, bizarrely, Mutahar says this is false. Here he obfuscates.
Your partner came into my chat and said the reason the last episode wasn't released was because of the Shadman stuff. Is that true?
Wait, what did Jen say? It was because it wasn't because
Jen
of
came
the
into
Shadman
chat
stuff?
and gave a super chat and said that the reality of it was the last episode was not being released because of the Shadman stuff, but the restructuring was going to happen. How does that play into this?
I have to fucking confront her on why she said that, actually, because the way that it was discussed, like, she had brought it up to me, is like, the whole, your clip was being played around, and it was like, oh man, is people believing that you were throwing Nux under the bus? And I'm like, no. Honestly, that last podcast episode wasn't even going to be coming out until we had, like, filmed it, like, a day or two before. This was all just stuff that was really happening fluid.
Okay. But you understand that things are happening fluid and conclusive statements are getting made. That's obviously going to cause...
Yeah, but I'm not the one making the conclusive statements.
If you remember before, we said there were two senses in which the podcast was ending. First, in the general sense, which is genuinely answered by the production company issues, and this probably did fall under his original claim about restructuring the podcast, as well as the minor factors that ended the podcast independent of Nux's association with Shadman. However, this doesn't explain why the last episode of the podcast was filmed at all, considering that Nux's association of Shadman was still a factor. And this is where Mutahar really messes up.
And the reality of it is, honestly, the situation was just so fluid at the time that we didn't even know that things like the last episode were going to be filmed, right?
What does this mean? It was on the condition that you dug further into the Shadman connection. So the implication here is that you found him innocent, but he wasn't, and both Lerix and Queeman discuss this.
I collabed with the producer of One Piece live action to show him lots of terrible live action adaptations and prove why I thought his One Piece would suck off the top of my head. His explanation sounded a little bit spotty, but I wanted to be fair and give him the benefit of the doubt until I looked into the two examples he gave me. This framing of Nux saying he has a history of trolling and grilling people he does collabs with is pretty slimy. Yes, he does troll people he's cool or friends with in a jokingly way, like how you'd play a harmless prank on one of your friends, but in no way are these collabs grilling or confronting people to make them look like jackasses. They're friendly collaborations with another creator and, more importantly, promotion. The first example he gives is him with his friend who he shouts out his channel, and the big troll is him saying, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of bad anime voice acting clips, and then pulls up a whole bunch of his buddy's own scenes.
You see, this absolute legend, Taiga Films on YouTube, you will be linked in the description. He is an official dub voice actor, and he voice acts in a ton of anime. What I have done today, he has no idea that I'm gonna be telling him, dude, we're gonna be watching some of the worst dubs in anime.
So what would have been the game plan of Shadman? Say we're gonna be looking at the worst child porn on the internet and pranking him with just his own drawings of little kids? What a legend! Check out more of Shad's stuff in the link below.
And finally, within this apology video, he uses exactly the same implication he'd used months before to explain why the podcast ended. So either he decided to film the last episode because he thought Nux was innocent, or he didn't and decided to film it anyway, but regardless, he never gets around to explaining why that episode even occurred. And in doing so, it kind of renders the apology to Chud hollow, as he refuses to give a straight answer to this question. The fact that Mutahar spent so much time hiding behind the fluidity of the production company rather than just giving his take on Nux Taku is one of the most frustrating things about the entire drama.
There's a 99% chance.
Does this sound like a guy who's been pressured? Does this sound like a guy who hasn't come up with this idea on his own? If your answer is, well, this sounds like it's his genuine opinion and something he wants to do, well, why did it happen in August? It's fucking December. Bro, there's no Hassan here, motherfucker. Nobody's putting pressure on you. You wanted to do this!
And this obsession with bloating the question bleeds into his apology video, because this is exactly what he does when he starts bringing up Taiga for some reason. Now, for those of you who don't know anything about the Taiga drama, I envy you. But the Taiga drama is a complete mess. It is multiple Google documents, frankly, a Kiwi Farm style archive by the person accused of being an e-stalker, and has a whole list of accusations listed next to it. Mutahar, in his video, says that he hasn't really looked into the Taiga situation.
Now, to preface, also going in forward into this video, I don't know much more about Bungo Taiga other than what I'm about to read here for you, and again, just covering this one specific case.
Then why would you bring it up? And if the goal here is to show that Nux Taku acts rashly without thinking through the accusations he's making, and that did damage to Taiga, even if Taiga is innocent, which I do not believe him to be, during the Reddit section of this video, you're acknowledging that you did basically the same thing during the Mama Mac stuff to people like Magnetar.
If you actively looked into Nux, you'd spot the weird pattern of shit that follows the man, especially with Mama Max. I don't know if it's a bias you have, but if you're going to be critical of others, which I am, expect people to be critical of you when you platform weirdos and don't actually vet them. And I totally understand that criticism, and it's not something I want to actually keep happening in the future, okay? Who's Magnetar?
Magnetar is the guy
This is big.
Max
This
is
is
claiming is
huge.
a pedophile. Now, apparently on stream, when you were discussing, and again, I don't want to jump you with this, so you stop me. But apparently on
Do
stream,
jump
I
him
guess
with
was
it.
Leon
No,
Lush
do
or something,
jump
you
him
talking
with
about
it.
the allegations, and you're like, well, apparently that guy's like a pedo too, or something. That's what he said today to me on stream. I guess, do you kind of have reservations
Do I
with
know
stuff?
that guy on a different name by any chance? Is there
Anthony
another-
Fields, that was his full name, I believe. That was
Was that the guy in the Believe All Accusation shit?
That was the guy who made the video with the girls.
Okay.
I guess
and
you-
that's the guy that Max called a pedophile at the end?
Max claimed that he like sent his cock to like a 15 or a 14-year-old girl or something.
I actually had a talk with that guy too around that time as well.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact nature of it, but did I call him a pedophile?
Well, he seems to think you did. I don't know for a matter of fact that that's the case. My question is, do you kind of look at that? Do you look at what was said in that video the same way, knowing that Max is not being super truthful here? Do you think it's possible that some of that stuff might not have been that investigation?
I mean, yeah, probably not. And if honestly, if I don't remember exactly calling him that, I feel like I should. But if I did, I definitely owe Magnetar an apology. Like unless there's a fucking 100% confirmed thing. Yeah, if I did, I 100% apologize. I don't co-sign on anything like that. I don't. Was that on my podcast? Because you mentioned.
So it's bizarre that you're condemning Nux Taku on a drama that you know nothing about, while excusing your own actions under the guise of other content creators also supported him, which I hate to be the bearer of bad news, isn't really an acceptable explanation if you're going to keep doing it. And I'm going to be honest, people have been fairly charitable with Muda. Muda did come out against Mama Max, but that was after a significant amount of pressure. Yes, many content creators did back away from Max, either from fear of being called a pedophile or because they didn't really understand the drama. But there were certainly people like Tommy C who were carrying that torch and sounding the alarm bells about Mama Max for quite a while. And it took quite a lot to get Mutahar to the point where he would actually go and look into this issue. As it stands currently, Mutahar has allegedly apologized to Nux Taku. Nux has made this claim both in a live stream and in his podcast.
Muda deleted his video, posted a community post, and then called me, and apologized.
If there's any truth to this, it's an insane thing to do after everything else. The idea that Mutahar would put up an apology video, redact the whole thing, and then put up a community note explaining the redaction because he didn't want to make slop content, only to then go and talk to Nux Taku, apologize, and what? Leave group chats, not message anybody? The frustration around the wider community is palpable.
6 hours? And deleted the video? Bro, and you leave all the group chats, you don't answer the fucking messages. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. How am I supposed to cover this better? People are asking me questions. When do I get to be in the loop?
People who've watched Muda for years or know him personally seem more confused than anything else. And I'll level with you. I wasn't sure about making this video. I can piece together some of the narrative and kind of give you a timeline of the way things have unfolded with this particular apology, but there is something that's bothering me. It feels like there's something missing, a little key piece of information as to why Muda is acting in the way that he has. I can theorize, perhaps the Mama Max cancellation had some impact. Having to burn a friend is a difficult thing to do. Could even be the fact that seeing somebody the size of Mama Max fail completely because the commentary community went after them may have scared Muda a little bit. But I will tentatively throw a final thing out, because one thing that does catch my attention is the discourse around this particular drama focuses on Nux and Mutahar, which is odd because they are two people out of a trio. And the fact that Umperville has been largely not discussed is kind of weird. If we're to believe Mutahar that he had a conversation with Umperville about icing Nux out of the podcast, why did Umperville change his mind? Why didn't Umperville look into Nux Taku? Clearly the choice to move the podcast to a more IRL location so that they can be more professional is something that appeals to Umperville as well as Mutahar. So the idea of continuing to work with Nux as a VTuber, somebody who, by their nature is going to have to call in, seems like an odd decision to make. Whatever the case, I don't think this is the last we've heard of this story. I think we may even just be at the midpoint. But regardless, I've gone from pretty uninterested to fascinated by the state of this apology and frankly how insane this drama is. But unfortunately, the story where it is at the moment means that I can pretty much only leave you with the same questions that I have. But one thing I'm always happy to do is thank our channel members and subscribers, particularly those of you who are molding. At this point, I'd say it's pretty fun to theorize, so let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.